Hello party people, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Tori. Thanks so much for being here today. For today's video, as you can tell by the title, as you can tell by my little setup, I'm going to be going over my physical TBR. Over the past couple of years, I've become really interested in reading again, and I've gone through a lot of books, but I also have bought quite a lot of books. Here in my room, I have a whole vertical bookshelf dedicated to the books that I get to read, but books that I simply own. And I've been seeing so many of my favorite book talk and booktube creators going through their own bookshelf, so I thought I would show you a little tour of mine. I had to take out the ring light because I had to close my blinds because I'm not about to dox myself, but I hope you enjoyed this video. So let's hop in. Okay, I think this is pretty good. This is probably as close as we can get so I don't cut my head off. At the beginning of this year, I purchased this vertical bookshelf off of the Container Store, and I really tried to be the girly who had like just stacks of books in her room on the floor, and then I accidentally spilled water on the floor and got a couple books wet, and I was like, no, we need to get a proper bookshelf. So this is my bookshelf right now. This is my little setup. There are about 10 sections on this bookshelf, so let's start with the top, and this is just full of all the books that I purchased the most recently. First, I have here Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. I needed to reach a dollar limit basically to get a book shipped, so I decided to pick this one up because I've heard so many great things about it. I don't fully remember the synopsis from this book, but I believe it follows a young woman who works at a convenience store, hence the title, and a lot of her friends and family are wondering why she chooses to be in this quote-unquote dead-end job. The next book I have here is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I believe this is a collection of short stories. In a small back alley in Tokyo, there's a cafe which has been serving carefully brewed coffee for more than 100 years. But this coffee shop offers its customers a unique experience, a chance to travel back in time. But the journey into the past does not come without risks. Customers must sit in a particular seat, they cannot leave the cafe, and finally they must return to the present before the coffee gets cold. I definitely have to read this soon because my book club is meeting very soon to discuss it. So I have right here The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. I mentioned this book in a previous vlog, but I also was supposed to read this for a book club but didn't get the chance. But we were kind of in a Bridgerton mood, and I believe this takes place in the Regency era as well. So this book basically follows our main female protagonist, and she's like an expert thief, and she falls in love with the assassin assigned to kill her. Next we have Sex and Rage by Eve Babbitt. I am like the stereotypical California girl who loves Eve Babbitt, so I picked up Sex and Rage. And this, I believe, is Eve Babbitt's first novel. I'm gonna force myself to read this very soon. Next, we've got Milk Fed by Melissa Broder. I picked this up because my book club read The Pisces and I really enjoyed it. I believe this just follows a young Jewish woman living in New York, kind of exploring herself, the city, and kind of getting over her eating disorder. I'm really interested to see how this is because if it's anything like The Pisces, I know it's gonna be erotic and weird, and it's gonna be for the sad girls. This is definitely one of those books that's kind of in like the sad girl book canon that has popped up in the last couple of years, but I can't wait to read it. Next, we have Bell Hooks All About Love. I read a few excerpts of this book in college, but I have never owned this book physically, so I really want to get to it this year. I was planning on reading this in February, you know, kind of like a Valentine's Day love month kind of thing, but it really slipped through the cracks. This is also one of those books that got a little water damage when I dropped water in my room, so this book is the reason why I got a bookshelf. Next, we have Clara and the Sun by Kazu Ishiguro. I had read another work by this author called Never Let Me Go, and I did not enjoy my reading experience reading that book, and I think the issue is that I love that movie so much, the one that has Keira Knightley, Andrew Garfield, and Carey Mulligan, so I just like could not get into the book which the movie was based on. So I really wanted to give Ishiguro another try, so I decided to do this one. And I believe this one follows like the consciousness of an AI and their thoughts in their life. Hopefully I will get to this soon. Next is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. I talked about this in my most recent book video, and I've also mentioned it in a vlog as well, but I picked this up because I loved his book Less Than Zero, and I really wanted to read American Psycho. And then the last book on this shelf is Homesick for Another World by Tessa Moshfegh. I believe this is a collection of short stories by Moshfegh. I've only ever read My Year of Rest and Relaxation by her, and I'm afraid to read Eileen because I heard it's very scary. So I'm hoping to read this eventually as well so I can kind of dive deeper into some of her other works. Moving on to our second row, but the first one here is Tonight I'm Someone Else, and they're essays by Chelsea Houghton. I just remember watching some YouTube video that influenced me to purchase this book. I have probably read like the first essay and I have not picked it up since. So I'm really hoping that I will get through this book eventually so I can either choose to keep it on my shelf or to get rid of it. The next one here is The Virgin Suicides. I don't know how to pronounce that man's name. I've literally never pronounced this name in my life. I've literally only ever read it. I feel like right now I don't really have a great track record with like reading books whose movies I enjoy. So we'll see if this is a flop for me or if it's a bop. But I love the cover of this one. I just think it's so cute. This copy also has an introduction written by Emma Cline, whose work I actually really enjoy. I really loved The Girls by her, so I'm excited to read this sometime in my life. The next one I have is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. I'm really a contemporary fiction kind of girly. I heard so many great things about this. Obviously, it was in Reese Witherspoon's book club, and I will read whatever Reese Witherspoon tells me to read. And I feel like because the hype has died down, I am more inclined to pick it up now. Next, we've got Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. Again, Reese's book club. It's been 2 years since I watched Little Fires Everywhere, so I feel like it's not as fresh in my mind, so I won't be as critical about the similarities or differences between the novel and the show. Hopefully I'll read this one. I feel like there's definitely a theme between this one and Such a Fun Age. The next book I have here is Fight Club, and this is one of the books on the shelf that I have read, but I haven't read it in a long time. I read this when I was in high school. Oh my god, this is literally following the trend of like being adapted into a TV show or a movie. I really want to look at it again with like the critical eye that I have as a 25-year-old instead of like as a 15-year-old. But this copy is also so fucking cool. The last book on this shelf is The Female Persuasion by Meg Wolitzer. I believe this book follows a young woman who's in college who becomes infatuated with a prominent feminist icon, and it kind of follows their relationship and the power dynamics between them. I'm giving myself the timeline of until the end of this year to read this because I tried reading it earlier and I was like, it takes place at a college. I need to be like in the college, back to school, fall mindset, even though it's been 4 years since I graduated college. But I love any like literary fiction that just explores like a power imbalance in a relationship. I think that's also one reason why Conversations with Friends is like my favorite Sally Rooney. So this is on the shelf. This third shelf right here is just full of classics that I would like to read sometime in my life as well. The first one that I have here is John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. How cool is this copy? Do I know the plot of Of Mice and Men? No, but I saw this when I was at a flea market and I was like, I love this like tiny little old version of this book. I have to have it. I feel like one reason why I just want to read classics is because I want to say whether they're overrated or not. I want to have a hot take, a hot opinion the next time I am surrounded by intellectuals. The next one I have here is The Day of the Locust by Nathaniel West. I actually read this book when I was in college when I was taking like a course about literature set in Los Angeles. I love this book and I just want to reread it to remind myself of how much I enjoyed reading it when I was in college. I'll read you the synopsis. The Day of the Locust is a novel about Hollywood and its corrupting touch, about the American dream to turn into a sun-drenched California nightmare. Nathaniel West's Hollywood is not the glamorous home of the stars, but a seedy world of little people, some hopeful, some despairing, all twisted by their own desires. From the ironically romantic artist narrator to a macho movie cowboy, a middle-aged innocent from America's heartland, and the hard-as-nails call-girl would-be star whom they all lust after. An unforgettable portrayal of a world that mocks the real and rewards the sham, turns its back on love to plunge into empty sex, and breeds a savage violence that is its own undoing. This novel stands as a classic indictment of all that is most extravagant and uncontrolled in American life. The two authors that I love the most are Joan Didion and Eve Babbitt, and they both reference Nathaniel West's work because Eve Babbitt believes that he comes from like the type of East Coaster who just doesn't understand California and like chooses to call Hollywood fake and call it a facade when really he's not even enveloped in the culture at all. So I want to reread this book and kind of compare it to like my own lived experience, but also my experience of reading Eve Babbitt's and Joan Didion. So there's this, and it's like the cover, so cool. Okay. The next one I have is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. I've read this book multiple times in my life, but it's another classic that I really liked when I was in high school and in college, and I kind of just like kept it on the shelf because I want to reread it again soon. And the last tiny gorgeous classics book that's on the shelf is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. Look at this cover. Isn't it so freaking cool? It's like, lady, man. I picked this up on eBay because I was like, I did not want the classic Great Gatsby cover, and then I saw this UK edition and I was like, I have to have it. It's gorgeous. Didn't really enjoy it in high school, but I feel like I'm surrounded by so much media that constantly references this book that I just want to have it on hand and reread it soon and like kind of like gather my own thoughts outside of like the classroom that I had originally read this book in, so it's on my shelf. Moving on to these like more normal sized books. The first book I have is probably not a classic, but it's Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is one of the few sci-fi books that I own in general, and I'm pretty sure I don't own this. I'm pretty sure I stole this from my college roommate, so Sam, if you're watching, I'm so sorry. I still have your book. But Annihilation, I believe, is the first book in Jeff Vandermeer's The Southern Reach trilogy. I read this book first before the movie Annihilation came out, the one that stars Natalie Portman and Oscar Isaac. And I just want to reread it. I feel like when I was reading in high school and college, I was just like not reading. I was obviously reading critically, but I don't think I really like truly absorbed anything into like my little mushy brain. I've also heard so many people online talk about how this series is one of their favorites, and Annihilation, the first book, is not actually the strongest in the three. So maybe I just have to get through this one to see what all the hype is about. Next, I've got Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. I literally only own this because I bought this in high school when like my local Borders was closing, and I was like, ooh, a classic. When am I ever gonna get a classic that's cheap? Girl, literally all the time. And not only does this include Breakfast at Tiffany's, but this also includes 3 of his other works: House of Flowers, A Diamond Guitar, and A Christmas Memory. So, the next book that I have is The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. I was like, I think I should read a Hemingway. It's like, it's kind of like the way that you want to know if a man has red flags, and I just want to read a Hemingway so I can suss out the men in my dating pool and see how crazy they are. Because similarly to like having read like The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, if your man likes Hemingway, woo woo. The next one I have is a sad girl classic, and it's The Bell Jar. I actually hate this copy. It has deckled edges. I read half of this sad girl classic when I was a sad girl in high school, and I just want to get to it eventually. I think this could also be the time where I read this because I believe The Bell Jar takes place in the summer, so maybe it's time to hop into the sad girl canon once again. And then the last book I have is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I believe I mentioned this book like last year in my like books I wanted to read by the end of 2021. Guess what? I never finished it. That's what happens when you're a mood reader. Unless something has like fully captured my attention and becomes like a feral obsession, I don't care about it. And I feel like The Picture of Dorian Gray might have to give it another shot before I decide to unhaul it from a bookshelf. All right, now we're down here. This is the next one. This one is also semi-themed, but also not really. This right here is a collection of books that my cousin Olivia recommended I read. It was around this time last year when like all the Asian hate crimes were happening and a lot of turmoil was happening in the Asian American community, and I wanted to diversify my bookshelf and read more stories from people who look like me or have similar backgrounds to me, and she recommended some of these books. The first one I have here is Minor Feelings: An Asian American Reckoning. I believe this is like a part memoir, part cultural criticism based on Kathy's own experiences and her own observations. The next one I have here is Native Speaker by Chang Rae Lee. Let me just read you the back because this is not one that I'm like very familiar with. Korean-American Henry Park is surreptitious, B-plus student of life, illegal alien, emotional alien, yellow peril, neo-American, stranger, follower, traitor, spy, or so says his wife in the list she writes upon leaving him. Henry is forever uncertain of his place, a perpetual outsider looking at American culture from a distance. And now, a man of two worlds, he is beginning to fear that he has betrayed both and belongs to neither. Definitely an older book that I feel like is not really talked about a lot, but definitely has a lot of amazing things said about the book. To be honest, I just have not been picking up really emotional reads lately, and I'm like, a man's perspective, I don't know. The next one that I have is The Gangsters We Are All Looking For. I believe this one is about a Vietnamese family living in San Diego in the 1970s and their experience. So it's another short read, but another great one that came highly recommended. The next one is Rolling the R's by R. Zamora Lindmark. This one is like a lot of poems and a lot of short stories, just like kind of about like the Asian American experience in America in the 1980s. So I think this is also another one that's very much a summer read, so I might like read it soon, well, especially while it's like hot and humid and sticky. I feel like I'm getting that energy from this book. This next one is Dictée, and I believe this is like a multi-generational story. Let me read the back. A classic work of autobiography that transcends the self, Dictée is a story of several women: the Korean revolutionary Yu Guan-soon, Joan of Arc, Demeter and Persephone, Cha's mother, Young Soon-ho, a Korean born in Manchuria to first-generation Korean exiles, and Cha herself. The element that unites these women is suffering and the transcendence of suffering. This book is divided into 9 parts, structured around the Greek muses. Cha deploys a variety of texts, documents, images, and forms of address and inquiry to explore issues of dislocation and the fragment of memory. The result is a work of power, complexity, and enduring beauty. I am so sorry if I butchered a name. Can you tell I have not literally read aloud in forever? But yes, that's Dictée. Last I have is Haruki Murakami's Norwegian Wood. I've read like nearly half of it. There's still a bookmark. I got 146 pages into this bad boy. Why did I read it? Because it's one of Harry Styles' favorite books. And this is also another one of those books that's like, if your man likes this, raise the red flags. I've also heard really great things about it from other people, not just Harry Styles, but it's on my shelf. I just need to finish it. We are now sitting on the floor, so we are now officially halfway through this bookshelf. Right off the top, I have 2 works by Joan Didion that look so similar. This first one is Let Me Tell You What I Mean. This is a collection of essays that she published like literally the summer before she passed. These essays range from 1968 to 2000. So another collection of Didion essays that potentially could take me a year to get through. And then this one is The Year of Magical Thinking, and I believe Didion wrote this like following the death of her husband and of her daughter, and just dealing with grief and life and the lessons she learned during this really painful time in her life. It says right here, from one of America's iconic writers, a stunning book of electric honesty and passion. Joan Didion explores an intensely personal yet universal experience, a portrait of a marriage and a life, in good times and bad, that will speak to anyone who has ever lost a husband or wife or child. This powerful book is Didion's attempt to make sense of the, quote, weeks and then months that cut loose any fixed idea I ever had about death and about illness, about marriage and children and memory, about the shallowness of sanity, about life itself. You know, light reading. The next one I have here is Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. This is, I believe, him chronicling his experience working in the culinary industry in New York. That is literally all I know. Okay. This next one is The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls. This is another one of those books that I bought as a teenager when my local Borders was closing. And I'm pretty sure it's a memoir about her life. I believe this was turned into a movie starring Brie Larson. So there's that. Will I ever read it? Who's to say? There are honestly some books that are on your bookshelf just because you have them there, not because you've read them. Okay, and then the last one in this little stack is Blood in My Eye by George L. Jackson. Let's read the back, shall we? I believe I bought this in 2020, around the time when like the Black Lives Matter protests were happening, and a lot of people recommended this collection of letters. When people were asked like what keeps you invigorated and like committed to this movement, they were like, blood in my eye, you must read. Let's see. Blood in My Eye captures the spirit of George Jackson's legendary resistance to unbridled oppression and racism. His unique and incisively critical perspective becomes the unifying thread that ties together this collection of letters and essays in which he presents his analysis of armed struggle, class war, fascism, communism, and a wide array of other topics. So yes, that is Blood in My Eye. And we're done with that shelf. So next, we are continuing our descent down this bookshelf. These are the next ones. I've got The Lonely City by Olivia Liang. I believe this is like a partial memoir, and it follows the author's life as she moves to New York in her mid-30s, where she's feeling very alone, and she explores the theme of loneliness through different artists or artist works that she loves and that she thinks has something important to say about loneliness. So I really wanted to read this book this summer when I was in New York, but that didn't end up happening. My plans fell through. So I'm not sure when I'll pick this up next. The next one is another classic. It's Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I don't really need to explain this one, but it's definitely another one that I really would like to read very soon. Next we have another classic, Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This is another one that definitely shaped American literature, but I also have big book fear, so don't know when I'll be reading that one. The next one I have here is White Teeth by Zadie Smith. I feel like this one has also recently become part of the sad girl canon. And the last book on the shelf is Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. It is a collection of short stories that does a little bit more of a feminist retelling of popular fairy tales. This is another book that I really wanted to read at the end of 2021, but I just did not feel compelled to read because I am a mood reader. So this is another one that I've had for a very long time that I hope to get through sometime in my life. I'm not going to put pressure on myself. And that's that shelf. Okay, the next one is this one. It's kind of a combination of poetry and theory. The first one I have here is Bluets by Maggie Nelson. So many people I love. So many of my mutuals here love Bluets by Maggie Nelson. Essentially, this is a collection of poems that talk about the emotions and the power of the color blue. Nice. Next, I have Charles Bukowski's Burning in Water, Drowning in Flame. Again, wanting to get into the head, into the psyche of a man with multiple red flags. Bukowski. This one is No Logo by Naomi Klein. I had to read this when I was in college. It's a lot of theory. It's like a lot of like political analysis, cultural analysis. Same thing goes for this. I have Susan Sontag's Against Interpretation and Other Essays. You know, you take a few philosophy classes in college and I capped this since then. It also has her essay Notes on Camp, which I read right before the Met Gala a few years ago when that was the theme. So I'm keeping this one around as well, just to make myself look a lot more intellectually advanced than I am. This one is another one that my cousin Olivia recommended for like reading up on like Asian American like identity politics, and it's Imagine Otherwise on Asian American Critique by Candace Cha. And then the last thing on this shelf is Be Recorder by Carmen Jimenez Smith, and it's a collection of poems. She's also a contemporary poet that my cousin Olivia really loves, so I love her and I think she's like one of the smartest people I know, and I want to be more like her, so another recommendation from her. This next shelf, a little random, but we have Pride and Prejudice. I really don't like this version of Pride and Prejudice. I feel like the pages inside are so unbelievably drab looking. This is one of like those Penguin classics that everyone loves, and I'm determined to read Pride and Prejudice sometime in my life because I do love the 2005 adaptation of this book. Next are kind of like my little self-help books within this shelf. I have Alan Watts' The Wisdom of Insecurity. I have read this before, but I just didn't want to display it in my home. It talks a lot about like how anxiety is caused because we're not living in the moment, and so it just is like, you should live in the moment. And kind of following that, I have two books that are related to one another. I have Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now and Practicing the Power of Now. gifted by my lovely mother. And then I have Atomic Habits by James Clear. This is also another one that I actually have read and I actually really enjoyed this. And it's all about like habit stacking, and it kind of talks about how there's a misconception that if you have a routine in your life then you are not living your life properly, but actually if you have built healthy habits and you have them in place, then actually life can be more fulfilling. How many of these can you see next? Well, we'll try and get through it. This one doesn't count. I just finished The City of Girls by Elizabeth Gilbert. I have Fleabag the Scriptures that I bought because I am obsessed with the show. I've yet to dive into this. A gratitude journal that my mom gave me a million Christmases ago that I still haven't like torn into yet, mostly because it's not like my aesthetic. I have Subliminal, How Your Unconscious Mind Rules Your Behavior. I have not read this in years. I feel like this is one I should definitely just like donate. I cannot tell you what this is about. These last few books kind of get cut off, but I'll just hop through them really quickly. The first one that I have in this stack is Learn How to Read Music. Yeah, this is kind of just left over from my childhood. I wanted to learn how to read music because I wanted to be a musician when I was younger, and I still held on to it. This next one is Palo Alto by James Franco. It's a collection of short stories. I have kept this on my shelf just because I enjoy the movie Palo Alto. James Franco is a really shitty person, so I don't want to talk about the book anymore. This next book is The Castle on Sunset by Sean Levy. This one talks about the history of the Chateau Marmont, which is a very themed hotel here in Los Angeles. I've read most of it. I have not finished this book. I feel like it's just nice to know about like really iconic spots in the city. And the next one I have here is Becoming by Michelle Obama. I'm going to get rid of this book as well. I would definitely recommend listening to this on audiobook rather than reading it because Michelle narrates the book, so that's really fun. And then these last two down here are embarrassing. I have Girl Boss by Sophia Amoruso. It's signed. I simply can't get rid of this, but I also don't want to display this in my home. And then the last one is Film for Her by Orion Carlotto. I read this, but I really did not enjoy any of the poems in this, I'm sad to say, but I do love the photos in this, and I'm kind of thinking about literally hacking this apart and using some of these photos for like collages or whatever I want to do in the future. But as a collection of poems, even though I'm not very well versed in poetry, it was definitely not my fave, unfortunately. Well, party peeps, that's it for this video. If you made it this far into the video, I love you. I know that this is going to be a very long video because I've been talking my ass off. Please let me know if you have read any of the books on this bookshelf so I can try and like prioritize some to read, because not only do I love reading, but I love discussing books and I love flaunting that I've read certain titles. As always, if you want to see more of me and if you want to see more fashion and book content, follow me over on TikTok or on Instagram. And if you want to see which books I read next, follow me on Storygraph as well. Thanks so much. I'll see you for the next one. Bye.